Welcome to The Explainer. I'm absolutely thrilled to have you here today because we're tackling one of the most fascinating and frankly, deeply ingrained puzzles of human biology. Have you ever noticed that your body just kind of seems to have a mind of its own? Especially when we're talking about sleep. Like, you might have had a late night out, totally exhausted, yet boom, you wake up bright-eyed at 7 a.m., completely frustrated. Well, today, we're going to unlock the mystery of exactly why that happens. We're looking at the incredible biological clock that's literally ticking away inside almost every single cell in your body. Okay, let's dive right into this. Why do you wake up, say, 2 minutes before your alarm actually goes off? And what really causes the sheer, utter misery of jet lag? Think about it. When you fly across the world, let's say from Paris to California, you don't just feel regular fatigue from traveling. You feel this profound, stubborn disorientation, right? Even if you sleep perfectly on your first night, come 2 or 3 p.m. local time, your eyelids feel like lead. Why? Because jet lag isn't just about being exhausted. It's actually your body fighting tooth and nail to hold on to an internal stamp of time from your departure city, completely ignoring the brand new sun outside your window.
Section 1. The Circadian Mystery.
So the scientific term we use here is circadian. It actually comes from Latin, circa, meaning about, and diem, meaning day. Basically, it's an internal biological rhythm with a period of roughly 24 hours. Now, the absolute key concept you've got to grasp here is that it persists even without environmental cues. What does that mean? Well, it means that if you are completely isolated from the outside world, I'm talking no sunlight, no temperature shifts, absolutely no clocks, your body will still stubbornly operate on this daily rhythm. It literally doesn't need the sun to tell it what time it is. So, what actually happens if we put that to the test? Well, back in the early 1960s, a French speleologist named Michel Siffre conducted these extreme out-of-time experiments. He basically lived deep inside a subterranean cave for months, totally cut off from daylight, no clocks, nothing. He just slept when he felt tired and woke up when he felt rested. And when scientists tracked his rhythms, they found something wild. Without the sun there to reset him, his human, quote-unquote, free-running internal clock actually defaulted to a staggering 25 hours. Yeah, 25 hours. So without that daily reset from the sun, our internal watches actually run just a little bit slow.
Section 2. The Sun, Threat, and Promise. Let's move to how this all builds up.
Okay, let's take a trip back in time. For the very first cells floating in the primordial ocean, the sun was a massive paradox. It was an intense threat, but at the exact same time, a huge promise. Look, 3.5 billion years ago, Earth's atmosphere was mostly carbon dioxide. There was zero oxygen, which meant no protective ozone layer. So the sun's UV radiation was incredibly deadly. It would literally shatter the DNA of early organisms. But on the flip side, the sun was the ultimate source of energy. So life had to strike this really delicate balance. It had to hide in the depths during the peak of the day to avoid being destroyed by UV rays, but then rise near the surface to harness energy when it was actually safe to do so. Because of this, early life actually evolved some incredibly cool ancient mechanisms to deal with the solar threat. Take photolyase, for example. This is just a fascinating enzyme. It literally uses the energy of a particle of blue light to repair the DNA damage caused by UV radiation. It basically fights fire with fire. But here's the catch. Because dealing with the sun's radiation was only necessary during the daytime, mechanisms like this were only activated during the day. So the crucial takeaway here is that the very first rhythms of life were actually forged in the crucible of surviving the sun's deadly rays, all while trying to harvest its power.
Section 3. Anticipation, not reaction.
Think about it for a second. If you wait for your environment to change before you react to it, you're already behind, right? Take fruit flies or Drosophila. They emerge from their pupae exactly at dawn. If they waited and emerged at noon, the midday sun would completely dry out their soft, newly formed wings and they'd die. Or consider bats. Researchers like Patricia DeCourcy studied bats resting deep in the pitch-black attics of old churches, or way back inside caves. Obviously, they can't see the sunset from in there. Yet, every single day, they wake up and start stirring just minutes before dusk, getting totally ready to fly out exactly when the darkness is right. They anticipate. Anticipation prevents wasted energy and gives them a massive, massive survival advantage. And we know for a fact that they aren't just somehow magically sensing the outside light. If you take that Drosophila fruit fly and put it in total constant darkness in a lab setting, it will continue its cycle. But get this, its internal clock is exactly 23.5 hours. Not 24, 23.5, which proves it's running on its own internal time, not just reacting to a 24-hour sun.
Section 4.
The botanical detectives. The scientific progression of all this is pretty wild, and it starts way back in 1729 with a French astronomer named Myran. He noticed that the leaves of the sensitive plant open up during the day and fold up at night. Standard stuff, right? But he wondered what would happen if I put this plant in a pitch-black closet. To his utter amazement, the plant continued its daily leaf dance perfectly. Then, decades later in 1758, Duhamel de Monceau took it a step further. He put plants in a deep, dark wine cellar just to make absolutely sure there were no temperature changes messing with the results, and the rhythm still persisted. Finally, in 1832, Augustin Paramus de Candolle used constant artificial light to show that you could actually push the plant's internal clock completely out of sync with the actual sun outside. And this brilliantly illustrates the sheer wonder these early scientists must have felt. Mayran actually noted, "The sensitive plant thus senses the sun without seeing it in any way." I love that. He couldn't fully explain it at the time, but he knew the plant possessed some profound hidden connection to the rhythm of the cosmos, totally independent of its immediate surroundings. So jump forward a few decades, and a botanist named Wilhelm Pfeiffer finally unlocks how this internal clock actually connects to the outside world. He developed this brilliant experiment. He kept plants in complete darkness, letting them run entirely on their own internal time. Then, out of nowhere, he hit them with a single, brief flash of intense light. What he found was that this flash acted exactly like a reset button. If he flashed the light early in the plant's quote-unquote internal night, it delayed the clock. If he flashed it late in the night, it advanced the clock. This perfectly proved how organisms synchronize their internal clocks to the ever-shifting seasons and lengths of days. It's like a biological software update.
Section 5. The Independent Clock.
To really understand why this was such a massive deal in the scientific community, we actually have to take a quick detour into naval history. Seriously. Enter the Longitude Act of 1714. This act offered a huge fortune to anyone who could build a mechanical clock that could keep accurate time on a rocking ship. Now, why was that so hard? Because metal expands in the heat and contracts in the cold. A pendulum clock on a ship crossing the tropics would speed up or slow down wildly depending on the temperature. Creating a clock immune to temperature was basically viewed as an impossible dream. So when a humble clockmaker named John Harrison finally did it, the scientific elite totally mocked him. They said he, quote, offered the world a little thing ticking in a box, ridiculous. They firmly believed only the perfection of the stars could keep true time, definitely not some man-made box. Now apply that exact same skepticism to biology. In biology, heat speeds up chemical reactions and cold slows them down, right? So how on earth could a squishy, chemical, biological organism keep perfect 24-hour time through hot days and freezing nights? Biologists thought a temperature-immune biological clock was just as ridiculous as Harrison's ticking box. Because scientists just could not believe biological clocks were immune to temperature, they spent the entire 1920s desperately hunting for an invisible external cue, some mysterious factor X. They hypothesized everything from atmospheric electricity to unseen cosmic forces to researchers Erwin Bunning and Kurt Stern actually thought they found it. But plot twist, they soon realized the plants were simply being reset by the faint red flashlight the scientists themselves were using when watering the plants in the dark room. It was a brilliant, funny accident. They then rigorously eliminated every single possible variable and finally proved the unbelievable truth. There is no factor X. The biological clock is completely 100% autonomous. Now, what's really interesting about this phenomenon is how this autonomy shows up in the animal kingdom. The term here is Zeitgedächtnis, which is German for time memory. An entomologist named Farrell noticed something super weird. Bees always came to his breakfast jam at the exact same time every morning, even if he didn't put the jam out. Later on, Karl von Frisch and his students rigorously trained bees to feed at very specific times. Then they moved those bees deep inside a dark, temperature-controlled mine shaft. And guess what? The bees still swarmed the empty feeding dish at the exact right hour. They possessed this deep, absolutely unshakable memory of time. And that brings us right back full circle, from ancient cells surviving deadly UV rays, to sensitive plants dancing in dirt closets, to bees remembering breakfast time deep in a mine shaft. This billions of years old autonomous timekeeper is ticking away right now inside nearly every single cell of your own body, governing your sleep, your energy, and honestly, your very survival. So I'll leave you with this final thought.
If plants and bees possess this ancient, unbreakable memory of time, what is your internal clock telling you right now? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and remember, listen to your biology. Catch you next time.